Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Marta Arumi-Planas y soy miembro organizador de este tercer Congreso Anual Internacional de Estudiantes de Doctorado de la UMH y soy la encargada de moderar esta mesa. Como he comentado anteriormente, la sesión está siendo grabada y para un buen desarrollo de la sesión es muy importante que mantengáis la cámara y el micrófono desactivados y que únicamente lo activen los ponentes una vez se les vaya dando paso para exponer el trabajo que habéis preparado. Además, os recuerdo que nos tenemos que ajustar a estos 12 minutos de presentación aproximadamente para que haya luego tiempo para discusión y preguntas del trabajo. Las preguntas que os surjan durante las ponencias las podréis ir dejando por escrito en el chat durante la presentación o bien levantar la mano, que es un icono que sale aquí abajo en la barra de herramientas de Google Meet, para pedir turno al finalizar la presentación. Dicho esto, y para no perder más tiempo, vamos a comenzar las comunicaciones con la primera ponencia. La primera persona en presentar es Ismael Ferreira, del Centro de Investigación de Montana, y nos va a dar a conocer su trabajo, que está titulado Effects of Sodium Chloride Partial Replacement by Potassium Chloride and Glasswork Powder, Silicornia herbacea in Traditional Dry Cured Pork Belly. Cuando quieras, puedes empezar.
Sí, hola, gracias, buenos días. Yo voy a hacer mi presentación en inglés porque es más confortable para mí. Y
claro, sin problema.
Y okay, can you see my presentation now?
De momento no la estamos viendo.
¿Ahora están?
No, aún no.
No. Okay, ¿ahora están?
Ahora sí.
Sí, bien.
Pero no te escuchamos.
So my work is...
perfecto, ahora sí.
Ah.
Todo bien, todo bien.
Gracias. Okay, my work is effect of NaCl partial replacement by chloride, potassium, and glasswork powder. And this glasswork powder, its name is Salicornia herbacea. And I did this replacement in traditional dry cured pork bellies. So to start, I want to start with the main goal, that is the development and assessment of the dry cured pork bellies using a traditional method. And I wanted to replace the common salt by the glasswork. So the milestones that we had at first were like the production of the traditional dry cured belly, because to start with it, we could do brine or something like that, but we decided to go with the traditional methods to really evaluate how would the pork bellies behave during this replacement, as this glasswork powder was not used previously with pork bellies to try to produce a bacon-like product. So the treatments that we have are control, that has salt, the salt reduced with the chloride potassium, and the salt reduced with glasswork. Then we did the analysis of the physical-chemical history, and with those results, we did the statistical analysis. To start, one of the main ingredients of cured products are salt. And when we are talking about a dry cured product, we have salt, nitrates, nitrates, and but recently we saw the harms that these products in excess can make in our health. And as the society as whole, using tons of different guidelines that were designated by the World Health Organization, our society right now search for healthier products, and this includes the meat products. So one of these approaches that is the most used is the reformulation. And this is the approach that I'm using right now with this replacement. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Okay, now a little bit of introduction about glasswork. The Salicornia herbacea is an allophytic plant. The one that I use is produced in Portugal on the coast, and it's commonly known as green salt. It's not a new thing. It's already known as green salt because of its taste and this ability of give this salty taste to food. But it is not used commonly in the industry because mainly because of the price. But if we manage to achieve a good rate of ratio of replacement and all of that, we can have bioactive compounds, antioxidants, and minerals, also fibers that will be higher in the final product. And if we will be able to manage well, it can be a really good option for the meat industry in the future. Now we're going to the methods and the production of the dry cured pork bellies. I'm not going to spend too much time here because I want to talk more about the product. But in the end, we had the bellies. We put it on the salt and mixing salt that we call cure salt. We did the dry salting. Then we cleaned it with warm water. We put it into refrigeration, and then we applied 2 thermic treatments with a pause time of 48 hours between them. And after all of this, that took approximately 1 week. We left 1 more week in the air drying. After that, we stored at 4 degrees to then do the further analysis. And these analyses were the water loss during the process. We also evaluated the color in the outside part of the belly and on the slice part. We did the water activity, the pH, the oxidation level, the centesimal composition, fatty acid profile, and then we did the sensory evaluation. So the formulation that you can see here, the salt mix, they had 100% of NaCl, then 50 of the salt, then 50 of chloride potassium, and the last one that was using the glasswood powder, we went a little bit low because we didn't know how the bellies would behave after this. And we used 90% of any of sodium chloride and 10% of glasswood powder. The levels that were applied to the bellies was 4% of the both of the first 2 formulations of the salt mix, and for the second one we did a 2%. So we did the reduction on the beginning, then we did another reduction when we applied the cure mix to the bellies. Now I want to talk a little bit about the results. The first results we have here are the weight loss, the pH, and water activity. As you can see, there were not different statistical difference related to the process. Someone can tell me something about the water activity, but these ones that have a statistical difference, they are related to the beginning. And to the beginning of it, we had the fresh meat, and we know that the water activity depends on several extrinsic and intrinsic characters of the meat, so it was not a big problem for us, and it still is not, because in the end we can see that the results for our water activity, they had no differences, and they were they had good values, let's say, for a dry cured product. Now for the colors, for the color, we only had a difference on the luminosity parameter, but in the surface. This kind of product, we do not see it often as a whole product. So I wanted to show this because as you can see, as we could see, the glasswood powder is green. And if you apply a green thing in a red thing and one thing that's supposed to be kind of reddish color, if you see it green, usually when you're in the market, normal consumers, they will think that it's spoiled or something like that. But we don't see this color difference here. We just saw this change of the luminosity. And as I mentioned first, we were more worried about this transversal cut, that is the slice part. And on the slice part, there was no difference at all. Now for the centesimal composition, we had difference on the acid content, which was expected as we were reducing the salt content. Just to clarify, I'm sorry, the BC is the control, BK is the chloride potassium, and BG is the glasswood powder. Another difference that we also found that was also expected was in the NaCl content, and it was nearly close to the expected. And of course, they had a huge difference, and it was really good in the end. So we achieved these milestones successfully. Then we went to the fatty acids. We have some difference between the saturated fatty acids to the monounsaturated and polysaturated, although the results cannot sustain that these changes are related to the glass work. So this is why I didn't highlight anything besides having the difference. I didn't want to highlight them because I cannot say for sure if they were because of the glasswood powder or not. Then we go to the results of the sensory analysis. And one more time, we had really good results when we were evaluating them. As you can see, the only attribute that we had a significant difference was the meat-fat ratio and the raw bellies and the meat-fat ratio in the cooked bellies, because we did both evaluations. And this is not related at all with the use of glasswood powder. And we were kind of worried about the taste or maybe the odor that you can have, because it has a really green odor, let's say. And the flavor is not too strong, but it didn't worry too much. The biggest problems that we thought that we could face would be the taste and the odor, and mostly the appearance. But as you saw in the CL lab results, there were no difference. And here, again, there were no difference. And with the biplot, you can see that the parameters and the attributes that we use, they were well located throughout the whole graph, and that on the belly they were characterized in different places of the biplot. But one more time, we cannot say that it's a good or a bad thing, because the parameters that we use, they did not had a statistical difference to prove it or not. So in the conclusion, the procedure was not affected by the reduction and the replacement of the NaCl with the glasswood powder. Then the luminosity was the only color parameter affected by the glasswood powder. And as expected, the bellies with GP had the lowest edge content. And sensorized, there were no detrimental effects related to the use of GP, the glasswood powder. The further research that I'm doing now with my team is the study of microbial growth that can be potentially caused by the reduction of the salt. We also are doing the identification and the changes in the mineral content due to this replacement. Also, the identification and evaluation of the volatile compounds. And in the future, it on a different level of the addition of the glasswood powder. And these are the acknowledgements. I would like to thank the Laboratory of Carcass and Meat Quality, that is mostly where I do my research, and to CIMA, the Research Center, and the SUSTEC team. So if you have any question, you can ask, and I'm also available by email if you don't want to talk right now.
Thank you, Yasmin. A very nice presentation. I really enjoyed listening all of these results. So now the questions are, the session of questions are open. You can leave it on the chat, or you can ask through your microphone here. I am not an expert of this topic, but I have a general question while I was listening. So overall, what were the results regarding the aesthetic and flavor changes between the treatments? And did it show any negative effects of using glasswork on the qualities of the product?
No, it's a really good question. In the beginning, we had the same question if it would change much, and we thought it would change much because, as you saw in the pictures, the glasswood powder, it has a really green color, and the smell is also really strong and the flavor not so much, but you can feel this earthy and green flavor. But in the end, the product was really good. We tried it, and the panelists that evaluated the product were also really happy with the product and all. And we could not see for now any detrimental changes in the final product. But it's necessary to have in mind that the level that I used of the glassware powder was really low, and it's really necessary to see how these changes will be if we increase this level.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. I do
Thank
not
you.
see any more questions in the chat, so we can go for the next speaker. El siguiente ponente es Guardia Bendou, del Instituto
Sí.
de Recursos Naturales y Agrobiología de Salamanca. Así que si
Eh,
estás por aquí, exacto, ya te
sí,
veo,
me voy a
gracias.
presentar en inglés porque mi
Okay.
español no está muy bueno.
Don't worry.
No
So the
pasa
next
nada.
speaker is Guardia Bendou from the Institute de Recursos Naturales y Agrobiología de Salamanca, and she's going to present her work, which is entitled "Do Wet Flag Leaves and Ears Respond Similarly to Drought? A Study Effect of two different water deficit regimes on physiological and antioxidant responses under combined elevated CO2 and high temperature." So whenever you want, go ahead.
I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I see that you are sharing your screen, but I don't see your presentation. Now, yes.
Okay. Now, yes?
Yes, you can make full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So, good morning. I am Wardia, PhD student from the University of Salamanca and the Institute of Recursos Naturales y Agrobiología de Salamanca también. I am very glad to present for you my work, Do Wheat, Flag Leaf and Ears Respond Similarly to Drought? A study of the effect of two different water deficit regimes on the physiological and antioxidant response under combined elevated CO2 and high temperature. Because of the human activity, we are remarking an increase in the atmospheric CO2, which is expected to reach 1,100 ppm by the end of this century, causing also an increase in the global atmospheric CO2 to reach 3.3 to 5.7 degrees. This will cause more frequent and dry episodes, and this is because of the absence or low intensity of rainfall and the water evaporation from the soil because of the high temperatures. All of these events will create more lands exposed to drought. This expected event will negatively affect the global agriculture, especially with the increasing in the world population, which is expected to reach almost 10 billion persons by the end of 2050, which create a very huge challenge for the global agriculture to create more sustainable agricultural production to fulfill the food needs. One of the most important cereals that are threatened by this climate change is wheat, which is one of the most important food group worldwide, consumed by 35% of the global population, which is the majority is distributed here in the Mediterranean zone. This consumption is because of the nutritional value of wheat as an important source of energy and protein. It is also used as livestock feed for the animals. But unfortunately, its production is expected to decline because of this expected climate change. We all know that all of these abiotic stress are widely studied and explained in a various types of plants, especially in wheat. So we can see that here take an example of drought, that when the plant senses the drought stress in the soil, it creates a cascade of events to close the stomata, which will reduce the photosynthesis and transpiration rate, and this in order to reduce the water loss from the plant. But this will also lower the intracellular concentration of CO2, leading to the oxygenation of Robisco. This oxygenation of Robisco will activate another alternative process for the photosynthesis to produce the primary metabolites that needs the plant, which is photorespiration. But the process of photorespiration leads to overproduction of reactive oxygen species, which create another problem for the plant, which is oxidative stress. Reactive oxygen species can cause lipid peroxidation, damages in nucleic acid, and protein oxidation, which may lead to plant cell death. But fortunately, the plant have developed several mechanisms to detoxify these harmful molecules. We can see the antioxidant enzyme, such as superoxide dismutase, catalyze ascorbate glutathione cycle, in addition to antioxidant metabolites such as ascorbate and glutathione. It is important to note that these reactive oxygen species are not harmful for the plant in small amount, but they are important where they play a role in signaling, controlling some process such as growth development, programmed cell death, and the response for biotic and abiotic stress. For the elevated CO2, the short-term exposure to elevated CO2 will stimulate the photosynthesis and improve Robisco carboxylation, and this will increase the carbohydrate and production of the plant and its biomass, in addition to improving the grain yield. For the long-term exposure to CO2, the photosynthesis will decline, and this is called photosynthesis acclimatization to elevated CO2. Under high temperature, the photorespiration rate increase. By contrast, the photosynthesis decrease. We will observe an activation of some enzymes such as Robisco, leading to oxidative stress. It is important to note that this abiotic stress doesn't occur in the nature individually, but they are occurring in the same time. And more than that, they are interacting between each other, creating a more severe impact on the plant. But some studies have revealed that elevated CO2 can mitigate the negative effect of this abiotic stress individually and their interaction effect. This by reducing the effect of oxidative stress and the enhancement of photosynthesis and biomass. And because of the low amount of the number, of the studies about this interacting effect of the abiotic stress expected in the next years under climate change, there are an urgent need to better understand the plant response to this environment factor in order to select the resistant one that can sustainably provide food security for this growing population. For this reason, our purpose in this study was to understand the effect of two different water deficit regimes, the long and the terminal water deficit combined with elevated CO2 and high temperature, on the flag leaf and ear under spring of the spring wheat cultivar, which is Gazelle. For this reason, we have tried to create a controlled environment where we try to mimic the expected future climate change by planting our plants under high CO2, which is 900 ppm, and fixed temperature 26 to 16 degrees day-night, which were 4 degrees above the current average of Salamanca. And the chosen genotype was the spring wheat Gazelle. For this, we have chosen 3 groups of the plant. The first group, we have applied 100% of field capacity of water, which is watered the whole development during the whole development, set as control. The second one was at 65% full capacity applied at vegetative growth stage, set as long-term water deficit. And the last one was 50% full capacity applied at air emergence, set as terminal water deficit. We have chosen these two different water deficit and under different growth stages because we were trying to mimic the nature and reproduce the periods when the drought was occurred. For the harvesting, the plant was harvested at anthesis growth stage, where we have selected the spike and the flag leaf for analysis of biomass and morphology, antioxidant metabolites, and enzymatic antioxidant activity. The obtained result shows that there are a negative effect of long water deficit on the fresh weight, dry weight, moisture content, and the area of the flag leaves. By contrast, we have observed a significant increase in dry matter per area. This is an indicator of the thicker leaves, which is a drought tolerance mechanism by which the plant reduces the water loss. For the ears, we have observed a negative effect of both treatment under dry water, for the dry weight and for the dry matter per area. By contrast, an increase was observed in moisture content. For the antioxidant metabolite, we have observed that the long water deficit increased the total content of proline for the flag leaves, and the terminal water deficit caused also an enhancement of this molecule in the air, which is improve the plant tolerance to drought stress. For the ascorbic acid content, we have observed a significant decrease under long water deficit for the flag leaf, which have the same trend as the biomass. And this is highlight the role of the ascorbic acid in growth and development of the plant because of its role in cell division and expansion. We have also observed a significant decrease in glutathione content of ears under both treatment. Moving to the antioxidant enzyme, we have observed also a significant increase in superoxide dismutase under terminal water deficit, but we have also observed a significant enhancement in catalase and glutathione reductase activity under long water deficit for the flag leaves. But surprisingly, we didn't observe any changes in the enzymes of ascorbate glutathione cycle, which is an indicator of moderate oxidative stress. For the moving to the multifactorial analysis, we have also here observed that the long water deficit affects more the flag leaf, causing a reduction in the biomass parameter and ascorbic acid, and also cause an increase in dry matter per area. For the ears, we have observed that here, similarly, terminal water deficit and long water deficit affect similarly the ears by reducing the dry matter per area and increasing the moisture content. Talking about moisture content, we have observed that this parameter is higher in the ears under both treatment than flag leaves. This was for us an indicator to better tolerance of ears to drought stress than flag leaves. For conclusion, we can say that Gazul, our genotype, could be defined as wheat cultivar with high capacity of adaptation to water deficit condition under the expected climate change. The long water deficit condition affects more the flag leaf by reducing the biomass, but in contrast, it increases more the dry matter per area as an adaptive strategy for drought stress. Finally, the higher moisture content of the ears and their water deficit and the enhanced basal antioxidant activity indicate that the ears have a better drought tolerance than flag leaves, which is relevant for breeding programs aiming to improve grain yield under future climate change scenario. At the end, I would like to thank all the members of the group of photosynthesis of ERNASA and also the financial supports. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, a super interesting presentation. If anyone has a question, can leave it in the chat or press the hand icon to speak. If nobody has a question, I will start. Thank you. My question is, you are changing the water conditions, but what would happen keeping the irrigation conditions the same? How does the increase in CO2 affect? So I mean, if you keep the irrigation conditions the same, the increase of the CO2 will have effect.
This is depend. For example, if we are studying the antioxidant, if we keep it as control, if that's what you mean. No, this is depend of what we are studying. For example, for the antioxidant effect, activity, I don't think so. But for the photosynthesis, for example, maybe we will have a loss in the photosynthesis, which is photosynthesis acclimatization due to different impact. For example, they are because of the increase of the amount of carbohydrate and the dilution effect of nitrogen.
Okay, thank you. If there isn't any questions, we will change to the next speaker. The next speaker is Fernando Garrido Auñón, de la Universidad Miguel Hernández de Elche, Departamento de Tecnología Agroalimentaria, y nos va a presentar su trabajo llamado Efecto del tratamiento precosecha con espermidina sobre la calidad de la cereza, sunburst durante la conservación. Cuando quieras, puedes empezar.
Vale, en primer lugar, disculpar por la cámara, pero tiene un pequeño problema con el ordenador. Como bien me han presentado, mi nombre es Fernando Garrido Uñón, pertenezco al grupo de posrecolección de frutas y hortalizas de la Universidad Miguel Hernández. En primer lugar, me gustaría agradecer al Comité Científico y Organizador por incluir este trabajo como comunicación oral en el Congreso. Les voy a hablar, como bien han comentado, del efecto de la espermidina sobre la calidad de la cereza sunburst. En primer lugar, me gustaría comentar que en el año 2021 España se convirtió en el sexto país del mundo productor de cereza. No obstante, en el año 2022 disminuyó la producción dadas las condiciones climáticas, si bien es cierto que incrementó la superficie destinada a su cultivo. La cereza es un fruto que está caracterizado por presentar unas excelentes propiedades organolépticas y nutricionales. Las principales propiedades organolépticas y nutricionales destacadas por los consumidores son el peso, la firmeza, el color, el dulzor, la acidez y el contenido del zumo. Además, la cereza también presenta una alta cantidad de compuestos bioactivos, como pueden ser las antocianinas, que son las encargadas de darle su característico color rojo, que son compuestos antioxidantes bioactivos que pueden tener un efecto beneficioso en la salud de los consumidores. Como bien ha comentado mi compañera Jennifer en otra sesión, concretamente la variedad sunburst de cereza presenta un color rojo homogéneo, presenta un tamaño que es del gusto de los consumidores, un sabor que es agradable ya que presenta un dulzor y una baja acidez. Y no obstante, lo que sucede a las cerezas es que presentan una rápida pérdida de sus parámetros de calidad, incluso cuando son almacenadas en condiciones en frío. Por todo ello, en los últimos años se están investigando nuevas estrategias, tanto en pre como en post cosecha, con el objetivo de incrementar esta vida útil y la calidad comercial en la cereza. Una estrategia que se ha ido aplicando en distintos frutos son las aplicaciones de las poliaminas, que son compuestos que están naturalmente presentes en las plantas y que tienen un papel importante en el crecimiento de las mismas, así como en la maduración de los frutos, ya que están relacionadas con los procesos de división celular, fructificación, y también se han relacionado en la maduración con retrasos en los cambios de color o retrasos en las pérdidas de firmeza, incremento de la firmeza. Respecto a otros estudios que se han realizado con las poliaminas en distintos frutos, se ha determinado, por ejemplo, que las poliaminas en mangos han retrasado las pérdidas de peso en comparación a aquellos frutos que no eran tratados. En las uvas han disminuido las pérdidas de la firmeza y ha incrementado el contenido de antocianinas. Además, en kiwis y en granadas han retenido el contenido fenólico respecto a los frutos que no habían sido tratados. Por todo ello, el objetivo principal del presente trabajo ha sido emplear espermidina a una concentración de 0,01 milimolar como tratamiento en precosecha por primera vez en cereza de la variedad Sambas, con el objetivo de ver los posibles efectos que puede tener sobre los parámetros de calidad comercial y funcional tras un almacenamiento en frío durante 28 días a 2 grados, a una humedad relativa entre el 80 y el 85%. El estudio se llevó a cabo en una finca experimental proporcionada por la empresa Master Rock en Alcoy, Alicante. Se hicieron un total de 2 tratamientos en momentos claves del proceso de maduración de la cereza mediante pulverización foliar. Tras los tratamientos se procedió a la recolección de la fruta y estos frutos fueron llevados al laboratorio, donde fueron analizados los principales parámetros de calidad durante este día cero y además se procedió al almacenamiento de los frutos, ya que a lo largo de 4 semanas, cada semana se haría un muestreo, es decir, durante 4 semanas se harían un total de 4 muestreos, 1 cada semana. En cuanto a los materiales y métodos, se analizó las pérdidas de peso, la firmeza con un texturómetro, el nivel de sólidos solubles totales con un refractómetro digital, la acidez total con un valorador de acidez, el color con un colorímetro Minolta, los fenoles totales mediante el método de Foligno-Calté y las antocianinas totales de la pulpa de la cereza. Respecto a los resultados obtenidos, como podemos observar, las pérdidas de peso incrementaron a lo largo del proceso de maduración de la cereza. No obstante, los frutos que habían sido tratados con espermidina 0,01 milimolar redujeron de forma significativa las pérdidas de peso en relación al control. Esto está relacionado también con los estudios que he comentado al principio del mango, donde también la aplicación de putrescina, que es otra poliamina, y de la espermidina lograron retrasar estas pérdidas de peso. Respecto a la firmeza, como podemos observar, los frutos que habían sido tratados con espermidina 0,01 milimolar mostraron un incremento en la firmeza con respecto a los controles, es decir, retrasaron de forma significativa las pérdidas en firmeza que se suelen obtener tras los periodos de conservación de la fruta. Esto puede deberse al efecto que pueden tener las poliaminas sobre las enzimas encargadas de degradar la pared celular de las células vegetales a lo largo de la conservación, y es que van perdiendo la firmeza. Respecto a los niveles de sólidos solubles totales, como se puede observar, también hubo una disminución significativa en el contenido de sólidos solubles totales con respecto a los frutos que no habían sido tratados. En cambio, los niveles de acidez total sí que incrementaron de forma significativa con respecto a los frutos controles. Si representamos el índice de maduración, que no es nada más y nada menos que dividir el nivel de sólidos solubles totales entre la acidez total, podemos observar claramente cómo hay una disminución significativa en el índice de maduración en los frutos que habían sido tratados con la espermidina. Esto es un aspecto que muestra que la espermidina en concentración de 0,01 milimolar podría prolongar la vida útil y comercial de la cereza, ya que tardaría más en llegar a un proceso de sobremaduración o tardaría más en madurar en cámara, es decir, podríamos tener esa cereza más tiempo almacenada. Con respecto al color, se ha representado a través del ángulo hue. Como podemos observar, hay una disminución significativa en el ángulo hue a lo largo del proceso de conservación respecto al control de los frutos que habían sido tratados con la espermidina 0,01 milimolar, y esto es relevante ya que un menor ángulo hue viene involucrado normalmente en un incremento de la tonalidad rojiza de la fruta. Es decir, esta disminución significativa del ángulo hue viene involucrada con un incremento significativo de la tonalidad rojiza. Esto se puede observar también en el contenido de antocianinas totales, que son las encargadas de darle este color rojo a la cereza, ya que aumentaron con respecto al control los frutos que habían sido tratados con espimida 0,01 milimolar, incrementaron de forma significativa el contenido de antocianinas. Esto también es interesante a nivel comercial, ya que las antocianinas es un antioxidante, una sustancia bioactiva antioxidante que puede ejercer unos efectos beneficiosos para la salud de los consumidores y estaría incrementándose con los frutos que habían sido tratados con las espimida 0,01 milimolar. Otro compuesto, bueno, esta relación de las antocianinas también se puede ver representada en la cantidad de fenoles totales, ya que también se vio un incremento en la cantidad, en el contenido total de fenoles totales. Esto podría prolongar también podría servir para prolongar la vida útil de la cereza, ya que los fenoles totales pueden actuar como sustancias antioxidantes encargadas de proteger a la cereza y incrementar su vida útil. Con todos estos resultados se puede concluir que la concentración de espermina 0,01 milimolar redujo de forma significativa las pérdidas de peso, firmeza tras 28 días de almacenamiento a 2 grados. Por otro lado, los frutos tratados con espermina mostraron un ángulo inferior y, consecuentemente, un incremento significativo del contenido de antocianinas totales en comparación al control a lo largo de la conservación. Además, los frutos tratados disminuyeron significativamente el índice de maduración a lo largo de toda la conservación. Por todo ello, la espermina en concentración 0,01 milimolar podría ser utilizada como una herramienta eficaz en pre-cosecha para prolongar la vida útil y el almacenamiento post-cosecha a 2 grados de las cerezas ámbar. En base a los resultados obtenidos, la espermina requiere de una mayor investigación en estudios futuros para conocer su mecanismo de acción como tratamiento pre-cosecha eficaz encargado de incrementar la calidad comercial de la cereza. Finalmente, me gustaría agradecer a la Generalitat Valenciana por la concesión del proyecto Prometeo, que permite la financiación de esta investigación. Nuevamente agradecer al Comité Científico y Organizador del Congreso, a la empresa Master Rock por las instalaciones y por las facilidades que nos dieron, y por supuesto al grupo de investigación de posrecolección de fruta y hortalizas, donde me hallo realizando mi tesis doctoral. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Fernando, por tu presentación. Abrimos el turno de preguntas. Las podéis dejar por escrito en el chat o alzar la mano por el Google Meet. Voy a empezar yo. He visto que aplicáis la esperdimina en el periodo precosecha. Y como curiosidad es si habéis comprobado aplicar el tratamiento a distintos tiempos y ver cómo afecta a los distintos parámetros, o si solo lo habéis probado a precosecha.
De momento lo hemos aplicado solamente en precosecha, pero sí que es cierto que en un futuro esperamos aplicarlos en otros momentos a nivel de post-cosecha, seguramente.
Vale, y también he visto que el tratamiento se ha hecho a una concentración definida, no sé si recuerdo si era 0,01
milimolar. Sí.
Exacto. Y claro, ¿cuál ha sido el criterio para empezar ya directamente con esta concentración? ¿O es que previamente habíais hecho alguna titulación y habéis visto que no era tóxico y tal y habéis elegido?
Bueno, esto no fue dar directamente con la concentración, sino nosotros hicimos un barrido de concentraciones, estudiamos 0,01 milimolar, 0,1 y 1 milimolar. Es decir, abarcamos un rango amplio de concentraciones en base a los estudios que habíamos revisado y a partir de eso ya obtuvimos que la mejor concentración era esta.
Vale, perfecto. Vale, pues si no hay más preguntas, pasamos al siguiente ponente. The next speaker is Iman Hajjaj. If you are here, you can switch on the camera. Okay. Perfect. Perfect.
Good afternoon. Hi.
She's from the Centro de Investigaciones e Innovación Agroalimentaria y Agroambiental de la Universidad Miguel de Hernández de Elche, and she's going to present her work entitled Correlated Response to Selection for Little Size Variability on Rabbits' Body Condition at Mating and at Parity. Thank you, and whenever you can start.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Iman Hajjad, and I am a PhD foreign student from Algeria at the Higher Polytechnic School of Arouila. And as you can see on the screen, today I'm presenting the entitled work, The Correlated Response to Selection for Litter Size Variability on Rabbit Body Condition at Mating and at Parity. Currently, the livestock industry main goals are producing healthier individuals with higher production and great adaptation to environment challenges. According to the recent studies, poor health and low productivity are associated to poor animal welfare. Furthermore, animal well-being has been related to the female's ability to cope better with environment changes without compromising her health or her reproductive life. This ability reflects animal resilience. As a method to increase our resilience and respond to the need of animals that are more adapted to environment changes, two lines selected for reducing the litter size variability were created. On the other hand, the body condition has been commonly used as a welfare indicator, and also for assessing the energy status of those in animal production. The body condition refers to the state of the body energy reserve, like the fat depots, that are used when the does have an energy demand, like reproduction or lactation process. Several methods are used to assess body condition, including body weight as a common technique and the perirenal fat technique, since this is considered as their principal fat disposed. Let me elaborate further. A divergent selection experiment for litter size variability to improve resilience is in progress at the Higher Polytechnic School of Arouila, where the low line represents the category who has the lowest litter size variability.
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt you, but yes. I think the slides are not changing. That maybe you can press the full screen mode, because I see just your first slide for the moment.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if everyone sees like this.
Okay, I will. Todo pendejo. No. Partager. I restart over? I start over?
No, it's okay. You can
continue, proceed.
Continue, but
okay.
I don't see the full mode screen. Now it's perfect. Now.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. Thank you. A divergent selection experiment for litter size variability to improve resilience of rabbit is in progress at the Higher Polytechnic School of Arouila, where the low line represents the category who has the lowest litter size variability, as we can see in the image, and the high line, which represents the category who has the highest litter size variability. According to several experiments carried out on those two lines, the selection produced individuals with a better immune, better productivity, where the low line has a larger litter size than the high line, with about one more rabbit at birth, a better immune response, and more tolerant to disease, where the low line has a lower concentration of cortisol and C-reactive protein in blood, in addition to a higher concentration of a higher percentage of leukocytes. A higher embryonic development and survival and higher percentage of normal embryons between 48 and 72 hours after mating is recorded for the low line. In this research, our main aim is to assess the impact of selection for litter size variability on those body conditions. Secondly, analyze the evolution of the individual body weight and the perirenal fat thickness at mating and parity in nulliparous, primiparous, and multiparous dose. And to achieve those goals, the methodology adopted is divided on two parts. The first one is the data collection. This part of the experiment will be carried out at the farm at the rabbit farm at the Higher Polytechnic School of Arouela. A total of 162 rabbit females were used in the experiment. Although those were bred at the farm, they were kept under a constant environment condition. First measurement beginning with the individual body weight of the individual body weight of all females were recorded during mating and at parity. As well, the perirenal fat thickness measurement, where those were submitted to ultrasound scanning of the perirenal region after an accurate shaving of this part by electric shaver. The perirenal fat thickness were directly measured in both sides, the left and the right, and the mean of the two measurements was performed at mating and parity. Furthermore, the number of the newborn kids for each female and each parity was recorded. Second, this is concerned the first part of our methodology. The second part consists on statistical analysis, where we have initiated the treatment of the data by a descriptive analysis of all the obtained measurements. And then these data were analyzed using a statistical program called the Rabbit. As a result, the figure 1 and the figure 2 display the development of the individual body weight for the low line and the high line at mating and at parity. The initial body weight of those in both lines was not widely different. It was slightly higher for the high line than the low line. It could be due to the fact that those were subjected to virus season. The weight of the dose increase reflecting the amount of growth through time, but always the high line has the highest weight. The high line had 5% a higher body weight than the low line at mating in the nulliparous dose, 7.1% in primiparous dose, and 5.5 in multiparous dose. The same observation is made at the parity. In the figure 2, we notice that the weight of the high line was overall higher than the low line in all different order of the parity, where it's higher by 5% in primiparous, 0.08% at the secondary parity, and 3.8% in multiparous dose. Concerning the perirenal fat thickness results at mating and at parity, our data reveals that the high line showed the higher perirenal fat thickness than the low line. The perirenal fat thickness of the low line fluctuates more than the high line, indicate that the low line females are adapting to the high energy demand of reproduction, parturition, lactation, maintain body condition and health, and using this body fat reserve to satisfy those demands. And last but not least, according to the table number 3 that show the differences between the two lines for the litter size at the first, the second parity and more, we notice that the number of the born kits is higher in the low line than the high line over all the parities, in agreement with the previous result from the earlier experiment carried out on those lines. In conclusion, the results of this study revealed a correlated response to selection for litter size variability or rapid body condition at mating and at parity. Selection for reducing litter size variability may lead to those with a higher health status. For all the physiological state, the low line selected for the lower litter size variability show a high stability and mobilization for their body fat reserves. This adaptation to respond to the energy demands for productivity and maintenance indicate that the females selected for lower litter size variability are more resilient than those selected for a higher litter size variability. And for last, ultrasound measurement of perirenal fat thickness in multipulse rabbit appear to be a good approach for a regular evaluation of their body condition. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any question you might have.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation.
Thank you.
If anyone has a question, can write it on the chat or press the hand button, the hand icon of the Google Meet to speak. So if there isn't any question, I will start.
Okay.
I have some curiosities rather than questions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what would be the reason why rabbits from heterogeneous litters are later more fit?
What? Pardon, could you repeat your can you repeat your question, please?
Do you know what would be the reason why the rabbits from heterogeneous and more variability litters are at the end more fit?
More fit. They are more heavier, not fit. They don't
exactly,
because they don't use their fat reserve. They we can explain it when we compare to the low line. The low line has a bigger, larger litter size, a great number of kits than the high line. So the female, it's not use. It doesn't use her energy because she has less kit than the low line.
Okay.
Less demand. When the female of the low line, if she has 10 kits, it's not the same for the high line if she has 3 kits. So the energy demands are not the same. So the low line are used more her body fat reserve to respond to all this energy demands from reproduction, lactation, and maintaining also her body condition stability. It's the main maintain her body condition and health. This is the main reason of because we have put those two lines under the same condition, under the same environment condition. So it would be the only reason to have the differences between both of them.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much for your answer. Is there any more questions in the room? So we can conclude this session. And thank you very much, all the speakers, for your interesting presentations. And I will stop recording now.